Lost_Ghost2920. We can't sleep. I want to say this is a draft of the first chapter. Feedback is appreciated. Intro. Late night shifts, isolation, and eerie encounters. Mark's world is about to take a twisted turn. Working as a night security guard at a pharmaceutical company, he's already fighting the weight of his own mind, haunted by broken relationships and unsettling memories. But when a mysterious, unmarked van appears in the parking lot, Mark and his coworker, Yase, are thrust into a bizarre encounter that quickly escalates. What begins as a routine check transforms into a chilling exchange with a man whose unsettling presence leaves them questioning everything. As they dig deeper, they'll soon realize that some mysteries are darker and more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Prepare for a story where nothing is as it seems, and every decision could be the difference between life and death. Night Nulla. Everything we do, every thought we've ever had, is produced by the human brain. But exactly how it operates remains one of the biggest unsolved mysteries, and it seems the more we probe its secrets, the more surprises we find. Neil deGrasse Tyson, ZZZZ, were. Ugh, that goddamn vent, rattling. It's driving me crazy. ZZZZZ, where the man sighs irritably and grasps the single lock of hair that escapes from the tucked-in creases of his baseball cap and pulls it back into place. His eyes glide from his hair strands to the vent, the old thing humming and banging, obsolete, and needing replacement. Does he need a replacement, a change? He felt as if perhaps he is obsolete. The man's eyes hover above the screens, the still static stabbing into his pupils, yet nothing. Would it be safe to lay his head down, even just for a moment? He worked the night shift. It was miserable, and so was he. The weight of his eyelids grew to be too much to bear. It was a familiar burden he had long contended with, an unwelcome visitor stitching shadows across his consciousness. He was used to the crisp clarity of wakefulness, to thoughts dancing like fireflies before vision. The world quieted until it draped him like a comforting quilt, further lulling him into shades of rest. When he opened his eyes, he was sitting outside, ancient trees that twisted towards the stars concealed by a shroud of thin, snowy fog. Before him loomed a solid wood cabin, serene in its stately solitude. Under the floating ambience of pale moonlight, 1,000 memories, the sense of burning wood, laughter distant yet alive, stories wild and woeful, swarmed him, all waiting in the deepest recesses like secrets entangled in the frost of winter air. As sleep enveloped him, so did the allure of the haunting isolation of the woods, the last of his last consciousness lost among the rustle of leaves sifting in the cold breeze. He turned away to peek out into the cold woods, the chilling white spruce trees sprouting out of the ground to become a single beautiful scene within the snowy terrain. A woman in the distant view. She stood behind a tree. Her presence made Mark falter. Suddenly he found himself back in the office, but a familiar feeling sat within the pit of his stomach. He attempted to move his fingers, but no movement was sent through his nerves. He was paralyzed. Oh no. Oh God, no, not tonight. Panic takes over his entire body. Chills shoot down his spine as he feels a hand tenderly placed upon him. Mark, honey, it's okay. Mommy won't hurt you again. An eerie voice creeps out, rough like she just got done smoking a cigarette. He recognizes the voice, but it's not his mother. He knew not who it is, but what it is. And it is not a person, much less his parents. His father died before he was born, and his mother lost custody of him, then committed suicide. He didn't know his parents, and his mind knew that. His mind used that. Abruptly, his coworker Yase entered the office, the sound of the door swinging open, pulling Mark back into reality. He sits up straight. He can feel himself shaking, the uncertainty of what just happened. It wasn't real, he tried to remind himself. I can't let that shit get to really Mark. Sleeping on the job again? Come on, man, what if I was an intruder? Although his comment had a serious tone, Yase still let out a chuckle. It was okay now. He had his friend, in fact, his only friend. Well yeah, I've just been out of it since Vanessa and I broke up, you know? It feels like the world suddenly just stopped and now I have to fight to focus or sleep. Oh, I totally understand, man, you need to get that girl off your mind. Truthfully, I never liked her. It always felt like she was judging me. As he made this remark, Mark batted an eye at him and he knew to move off the subject. Well, anyway, I'm sorry. tonight Jack and his brother are having a party, you wanna go? A strange offer coming from Yase considering he and Jack got into a drunken fist fight last time they were around each other. Do I wanna go meet clueless women and do Molly? Nah, I think I'm good on that one, Chief. Sarcasm drenched Mark's words. He was feeling irritable. As that irritable feeling expanded like a bursting balloon, he began to bite his nails, a bad habit Mark let destroy any hope of having normal nails. You know, I wouldn't go to a party where drugs are being peddled around. This one is more chill, you should get out of the house, man. Mark knew he was trying to do a good thing, but something felt off about the offer. Alright, just shut up about it, I'll think about going, for a few minutes. Okay? The pause before he said okay reassured Yase he would genuinely consider his offer. The next hour flies by, and they sit around in the office staring at the camera feed, sometimes doing a routine check of the premises, making sure the building is clean and there aren't any animals or people. They work at a pharmaceutical company as security. Mark pondered how a guy like Yase, who was tall and built, his long black dreads had blonde tips, along with a very slight but recognizable Jamaican accent, ended up taking this job with Mark. He knows why he's there. He doesn't sleep, so he worked as a night security guard. Although he figures Yase fit the role more, Mark is slim build, not weak, but he wasn't as strong as Yase. He wasn't intimidating, he knows that. I turned to look at Yase, who was fiddling with the zipper to his security jacket. Yo man, this van has been parked in the parking lot for like half an hour. It isn't one of ours, is it? He bends over and looks down at the feed. I don't think so. Maybe we should go check it out. He turns around and heads for the office door. Wait, I don't know. Are you sure we should go out there? He isn't a particular fan of confrontation. Yase, however, could care less. Well, there's an unmarked van suspiciously sitting in the parking lot. They don't have a license plate. Let me think about it. Let's go, Mark. An assertiveness echoed in his voice when he said Mark's name. Mark and him both headed out of the office. Mark stood side by side with him, a way to let the civilian know there's no one in charge. He overthrew the situation. On the off chance it's a criminal, what do they do? It's too late to think. They exit the building through the west wing door. As Mark and Yase approach the van, they can hear music blaring to the point the shaking of the rusted metal on the van is audible. At first they mistook the music for a house a block or so down the street. Sometimes they had house parties. The music would be so loud you could hear it from the west wing door. Yase approached the van, knocking on the tinted window. The back didn't have windows. Excuse me. Roll the window down, please. He shouted over the music. There was a pause, then the music turned down, and the window came down with it. Cigarette smoke rolls out of the car, and a slight hack comes from a sunken pale face that emerges from the smoke. Why hello there, gentlemen. Didn't mean to bother anyone, thought I was alone. The tone of the man's voice made Mark visibly wary. You see that building over there? Yase points to the pharmacy. We work here, this is private property, and I'm afraid you can't just park out here and blast music. The man's cold eyes travel over to Mark, examining him. He feels chills hit his spine again. The man's eyes glide up and down. He just let out a chuckle as if something funny had come to mind. Well, that's my bad. I can take my leave. It's not like I wasn't doing anything important, just taking a minute, you know? Mark looked at Yase, who seemed uneasy, not nervous, but alert. Mark wondered why. Your van is missing plates. Why is that? Yase's tone sharpened. They just expired. Already had a cop try and pull me over about it. Got a damn ticket. Yase interrupted the man. He could feel something off with this whole situation. The vibe of the man was just off. Maybe I should call the cops, get a search warrant for the tinted van, and another ticket for the plates, unless we all want to just carry on with our night. He made it clear they weren't just there to chat, which seems to be the impression this disturbed man got. Right, the man roughly grumbled, his whole tone and mood shifting. Without saying another word, the tinted window came back up, the music blasting before he took off, speeding out of the parking lot. Jesus, what an asshole, and a creep. I don't know, something was off about that guy, right? He turned to Mark, waiting for his confirmation. But Mark stood perfectly still, staring right at where the man was once perched against a window. The way he looked at me, it was like a lion looking at its prey. I couldn't breathe. The entire night had been one weird premonition. Mark had a terrible feeling. Something is coming, I don't know when, I don't know what, but something. Mark found himself sitting back in the office chair, waiting for Yase to finish the final check of the property. Those woods, that woman, that man, what is it all? Am I crazy to think they're connected? You already know you're crazy. His mind ponders and ponders until it drifts. He lays back in the chair, his muscles relaxing until he finds himself sleeping. Now he stands before the hut, the glistening trees that shout their fragrance through the wind. His senses are overwhelmed, he's here. Mark steps forward, the shining white snow crunching beneath his Timberland boots. He pares his head to just barely peek into the tent, but his eyes hit a sight he can't comprehend. A woman sitting calmly with her legs crossed and hands folded in one another. Mark recognizes the majestic dark skin. She was beautiful, her skin so smooth it almost looked like she was devoid of pores. But the most distinguishing detail, the thing that stuck with Mark throughout the years, that beautiful, silk, long, black hair. Her face had no facial features, and suddenly Mark knew, it's his mother, bits and pieces of her. Mark only had one photo as a child, her face faded in it. Across from her sat Vanessa, and Yase. What the hell is this? Mark was so wrapped up in his train of thought he forgot this was all a fantasy, a dream. Mom, is that you? Oh Mark, we'll be together again soon. Don't worry, all of us will, Vanessa spoke. Mark's eyes widened. When his mind mimicked loved ones, there were features he could use to identify they weren't real, a useful skill to have during his sleep paralysis. But her voice sounded so real. What is that supposed to dash? Mark, Yase stands up from the dinner table, wake up. What? Mark's tone bluntly screams frightened, wake up. Mark. He shoots up from the desk, sporadically, turning to meet Yase's eyes. You alright, dude? You were shaking and you looked all sweaty. He chuckled. Yeah man, I'm fine. I am not fine, Mark thought immediately following his response. There was a pause from both of us. Yase took this as a signal to move on. You want to check out that party, even just for a little bit? Mark sighed. He didn't, but he knew Yase was just worried about him. Sure, let's go. They both left the building. Mark didn't drive to work, so his car wasn't there. They both got into Yase's yellow 1997 Ford Ranger. Not a bad car, a little older, but Mark always liked the way the car looked. Even if he wasn't a fan of Ford, he could appreciate a pretty car. When they got into the car, there was this feeling, close to awkward but not awkward. Hey Mark, you were mumbling something about your mom earlier. You seemed pretty shaken up. What's going on lately? You're barely sleeping, nodding off at work. Genuine concern echoed from his voice. I'm okay. You know, I was just thinking I've never really told you about my parents, huh? Your parents? Yase's tone shifted, from concern to curiosity. Yeah, my father passed away before I was born. I was born and lived in Canada. Well, not for long anyway. I only have a few memories. It's getting harder to remember these days. I can't even think of what my mother looks like anymore. They took me away from her, so I mostly remember growing up in homes. You've never mentioned any of this before. I'm just wondering why bring it up now? Not something I love to talk about, but you're my best friend, and I want you to know that, I guess. Know me? Mark's stomach twisted. This hurts. So, they took me away from my mom. I don't really know why. I think she might have been abusing drugs, coping with my dad's death. I think she also got diagnosed with schizophrenia. CPS caught wind, and next thing I knew, I was being raised in homes where I was beaten, reminded of my faults. You know, my mother may have made mistakes, but she's the only one who understood my problems. Everyone else struggled to help me. Yase didn't say anything for a minute, the words I spoke sinking its fangs into the back of his head, sucking out the last of his consciousness. The unsettling silence felt elongated and stretched until Yase felt he had to say something. I'm sorry, man. I really am. How could they just strip you away from your mother? My mother was ill, diagnosed with schizophrenia. They tried diagnosing me with it when I was a kid. It didn't work, too young, but I have been diagnosed with brief psychotic disorder, as well as sleep paralysis. It's a hard thing to live with, and sometimes I see my mom. Yase peeked over at me while he drove. My mother lives the Rastafarian lifestyle. In our culture, it's a lifestyle where you grow out your dreads, barely touch them, you wear certain clothes, eat certain food. It has so many preset rules. When I moved out to get away from my family, I told her I thought the way she lived was disgusting. I regret that more than anything in my life. I should have taken part in it. It's my culture, and instead of embracing it, I disrespected it, and that is something I will never forgive myself for. Mark, we all make mistakes. And you're a victim. The sincerity in his tone shook Mark. He felt a new sense of companionship with his childhood friend. Wow, why don't you start now? Feel too ashamed, I suppose. Maybe someday, but it'd have to start with my mom. I deserve that, and so does she. My point is, don't let this tear you up. Don't think of yourself as a villain. There was a moment where neither of them talked. They just let the words sink in. Well, we're here, bud. We won't stay long, I promise. Mark and Yase got out of the car, the cultural difference yet agreement that they came to stun him. How could two people who come from two completely different cultures and worlds come to an understanding about one another? He wanted to talk to Yase more. But before he knew it, there was no sight of Yase. Mark found himself, blankly stuck in a crowd of people, a dandelion in a field of dying weeds. All the shouting, all the cries, they mixed together into an awful symphony of mental horror for Mark. He rushes to the bathroom, locking the door behind him before splashing water on his face. God damn it, what is wrong with? His mind stops moving. For once, he wasn't asleep. For once, it felt even more surreal. His mother, sitting on the sink, her hollow face staring right at him in the mirror. His body was stunned, his breath stunned. What was happening? Oh Mark, what are you doing here? My darling little boy would never come to a place like this. How could he? Mom, this isn't real. What in the actual fuck is going on right now? A maniacal laugh leaves Mark's thin lips. I really am going insane. Unfortunately, no. I am here, Mark, and I'm here for a reason. It'll all be clear soon. There's a knock at the bathroom door. Mark folds his face into his hands, his breath quavering, his body shaking. Hello? Said a voice coming from the hall. Mark collected himself, taking a moment to breathe. He takes a sharp inhale of breath, then lets it out aggressively. He picks himself up on the floor, twisting the knob to open the door. What a fool he was to not recognize the voice of the woman who just broke up with him. Hello? Mark said as he opened the door. The woman's eyes widened. How could this coincidentally happen? Hey Mark, I didn't know you'd be here. The awkward pause after she spoke felt like century after century. Right. You broke up with me, ghosted me for 3 months, and all you have to say is you didn't expect me to be here? Figures. He pushed past Vanessa's shoulder, the contact only making him regret his decision to come here even more. Mark, don't be like that. She was slurring. Mark assumed she'd been here for a while and was probably drunk or close. For some reason, this thought process brought Mark to a halt. Before he knew it, or could even think, he was outside, feet in the pool, beer in hand, and Vanessa sitting across from him. But that's what she did to him. That's why he so deeply loved her, still loves her, although he would never admit that even to himself. She had that charm, though, he had to admit. She made any bad situation seem good. Vanessa sighed, looking over at Mark with this look in her eyes, a look he so desperately tried to find the meaning to, yet, nothing. Please, don't pretend like you don't know why I left. That night was really scary for me, Mark, to see someone I knew to be so gentle, become like that. Vanessa, I would never hurt you, you know that, right? Mark, let's not have a rerun. What happened already happened, the only direction is forward. How have you been? The tone of her voice went from shaky to honest. That transition confirmed for Mark that she had lost interest in him. Can't really sleep after, yeah. Other than that, it is what it is, getting through the days. Jesus, way to be a Debbie Downer, Mark. She giggled, oh the way she giggled, and the dimples in her cheeks perked up into proper position, making the most beautiful, genuine smile anyone had ever seen. Do you actually want to know? And before Mark even looked over at the girl, she was nodding her head. I haven't been great, Nessie. Everything feels so dim, the dreams have become more vivid. It's like my memories are flooding back, but they're not real, or maybe they are. I'm tearing myself up trying to find out the difference. I swear I can remember my mother singing to me, but I never recalled this memory before. It's just strange, you know? Mark turned to look at Vanessa, who appeared to be sleeping sitting up. Come on, let's get you home. He nudges the woman, but her eyes don't open. Nessie? He nudges the woman again, but still no movement. Nessie. Oh God, what did you do? Yase? Yase? Mark pleaded and cried, begging his friend to make his superhero appearance or anyone willing to help. Yase ran out of the house. Seeing Mark on the floor hovering over a woman's body only brought sinister thoughts to the man who was now slightly drunk. What the hell happened, Mark? His shaky hands reached over to her throat to find a pulse. I don't know, she must have taken something. I can barely feel her heartbeat. We have to get to a hospital right now. Yase hands over his keys to the clearly sober Mark, who then grasps the woman's wrists. Yase, following his lead, decides to grab her ankles. They hoist her up and carry her to Yase's truck, setting her in the back seat. On the way to the hospital, Mark wondered what could have happened if he wasn't there. What would be of Vanessa right now? He didn't want to know. He turned on the radio to drown out the constant thought and noise in his head. Woman missing. Description is as follows: age 23, blonde hair, last seen wearing white sweatpants and an orange cut-off sweatshirt. Please contact authorities if you see anyone matching this description. It wasn't completely unusual to hear about someone going missing in the area, but it also wasn't common, especially a missing report for an adult. They reached the hospital, which Mark couldn't be more thankful for. Whether he had been speeding that entire time or not, he wasn't sure, nor did he really care. Mark picked up the woman, Yase following the lead once again. A woman sitting outside the monstrous building on a bench smoking a cigarette plants her attention over on the group. Mark assumes she's a nurse or employed within the hospital because she appears to be wearing the standard scrubs. Without any words being spoken or traded, the next sight the men saw was Vanessa being taken away on a stretcher. Mark sits outside the hospital, his face folded into his hands, his breath quavering once again. Usually, he would internalize this awful feeling, but Mark for whatever reason knew this wasn't his fault. He worried about Vanessa, yet the thought crossed his mind. Would she want me to worry about her? You need a cigarette? The woman from before, the nurse, or the doctor? A little ironic, don't you think? Aren't you supposed to tell me how awful cigarettes are, doctor? She let out a soft chuckle. Nurse. You can call me Amy though. Your girlfriend is going to be alright, by the way. She needs her stomach pumped and then some observation. After that, she's good to go. Mark let a light sigh escape his lips. Good, that's good. She's my ex-girlfriend, by the way. Ah, my bad. I didn't mean to assume. What about that other man? Coworker. I'm sorry, I don't mean to come off rude, but why are you out here talking to me? The girl laughed again, this time louder. Mark felt as if he was being made fun of, but he didn't really mind it. I just thought you looked like someone who needed someone to talk to. Well, I appreciate that, Amy. Most people wouldn't take the time to do a decent thing like that. I guess I'm not most people. Her light rose lips perked up into a sweet smile before she jammed her cigarette into the smoking receptacle and walked back into the building. Mark felt a sense of loneliness. He laid his head back, looking into the sky, the clouds forming interesting shapes, one forming what appeared to be a camel, one that looked like a flower growing in an empty meadow, and with that Mark drifted into sleep. Yet he doesn't find himself in the snow-wooded terrain he usually finds himself in. No, this time it was different. This time it was worse. God damn it, what was his, Mark? A woman exclaimed, her thick layer of bright red lipstick smeared on her lips with eyelashes that curled into themselves with makeup. He pissed the bed again. You know, when you said we'd be taking a child and I didn't think he'd be such a burden. The man had black hair grossly slicked to the side with too much product. The woman dragged the boy out of bed and placed him in the corner, the boy standing obediently with a blank face. Well, anything to say for yourself, brat? With a meek expression, he turns over. I was just scared, a quiet, nervous tone surrounding the sentence. The boy stood in the corner, his eyes squeezed shut. the voice changes, from a man to a child. "It was all your fault, Mark." When the boy opened his eyes, it seemed like he was observing from afar, but now he was truly here. He turns around, and before he could assess his surroundings, Mark realizes he isn't in the house anymore. He stands in the Arctic woods yet again. They all begin to point at him, running around him as they laugh, the laughter drowned together, a demonic harmony forming. And then, nothing. "Tell me, Mark, do you feel safe in your home? Are there any times you feel scared or nervous?" Mark found himself back in front of the hospital, at least he thought. He snapped into reality, but then again couldn't see anything in front of him. In reality, his senses had been stripped away from him, a blank slate sitting in a blank world. That is until he hears that damned woman's voice again. Before it was clear, it was unheard yet recognizable. Now it was distorted, and it was what he was used to. "Ah, poor thing. Don't forget you tore yourself away from us, not anyone else. It was you. It was all your fault." A gasp left the man as he sat up. He struggled and pleaded, gasping for air. A few tears managed to break through his eyes, but they quickly ended and Mark made his way back into the hospital, or what he thought was the hospital. It felt like everything was fabricated, just a mirror of something real, his mind reflecting a reflection of distorted reality. Amy stepped back outside, this time actually sitting down at the bench with Mark. He realized he didn't know where Yase was. He figured he was off being a ladies' man with some other nurse. "What happened tonight?" Amy said while she scooted the lower half of her body to be comfortable as she opened her pack of cigarettes and pulled out 2 sticks of cancer. "I honestly don't know. We showed up to a party and Vanessa was there. We got to talking and next thing I knew I was speeding on my way to the hospital." While Mark spoke, Amy slipped a cigarette in between his fingers and lightly smiled. He wasn't much of a smoker, but tonight he'd take up the offer. "Well, it looks like she either got laced or took pills while drinking." Mark interjected. "She was laced," he said firmly. "She's not the type to do something stupid." "I get it. I'll take your word for it. What's your name, by the way, weirdo?" "Mine is Amy." As she asked the question, she lifted her arm, lighter in hand, and lit the cigarette Mark was holding. He took a long, slow drag, feeling the burning sensation creep down his throat into his lung cavities, as if he could feel each cell individually burn up with each hit. "Mark, nice to meet you, Amy." He lightly forced a grin. It felt wrong. She chuckled lightheartedly. "Nice to meet you too, Mark, but you don't need to force anything with me. I get it. This world is shitty sometimes. You're having a shitty night. For that I am sorry." Her words felt the warm, embraceful hug Mark needed. It felt reassuring. "Thanks, funny enough that means a lot." Amy put her hand on Mark's shoulder and ever so barely squeezed. "Get some sleep, come back in the morning." Mark nodded and took the last drag of the cigarette the nurse gave him. He gave her a wave before simply walking away. He felt extending the interaction could sour it, when that was honestly one of the most reassuring conversations he's had. But as he got back in his truck, he realized there was no sleep tonight. He had to go back to work. He also had the sudden realization Yase still wasn't around. He shot him a call, no answer. Other than just sitting in the car waiting for him, he wasn't quite sure on what else to do. He leaned his head back in the seat, his neck joints cracking gently. When was the last time I worked out? Mark thought. When was the last time I even stretched? Mark looked out the window and the tall standing pine trees. He could smell the pine. And as he inhaled the sweet aroma of nature, he slipped into sleep. This time he wasn't taken anywhere. He wasn't in what he believed to be his old house. He wasn't in one of his foster homes. He was in the truck. Yase's truck. But something felt off. He could feel something eating away at him. He lifted his head and saw the faceless woman again. Mark's manner diminished. He felt so small. Why won't you just leave me alone?" The woman giggled softly. "Leave you? You mean like you left me?" "No, Mark. Never. I'm here for you. Don't you understand? I want to help you. They stole you away from me. But it's coming. Just like I said it would." Mark could feel his muscles tighten. the muscles surrounding his arm hairs tightened, shooting the hairs straight up. "Mom, stop this, please, you're gone." The faceless woman tilted her head, her literal blank expression laying down an uncanny feeling. "Oh honey, I never left." She brought her hands up slowly to Mark's chest, gently placing her palms on his shirt before he felt a heavy impact. Falling out the vehicle, he couldn't help but notice there was no second impact, he was just falling. Sometimes he fell fast, sometimes slow, sometimes it felt like he was suspended in air, space, and time. Mark began to violently scream. With that, he jolted forward, finding himself back in the vehicle. He slammed his head forward so fast his head hit the dashboard with immense force. He could feel a little blood trickle from the top of his nose down his cheek and into his mouth. The blood tasted bitter, like copper, but at least it reminded him this was real, he was okay. "Jesus Christ, Mark!" Yase yelled out from the driver's seat. They were driving, they were almost back to the building they were working at. "Dude, I think you broke your fucking nose." Mark bunched up his shirt in his hand and gently tapped it against the gash on his nose. Even the gentle taps struck his pain receivers. "I am sorry, Yase. I was having a night terror. I think driving made it worse." "So it's my fault?" Yase said with a slightly agitated tone. He was trying to be a good friend, but he can only deal with so much in one night. No. Tonight has just been, I don't know, eventful." Mark rubbed the remaining blood off his face, his nose still sore and actively swelling. Yase let out an exasperated sigh. "I get it, man, it's been a long night, I'm sorry. I really didn't know Vanessa would be there. We don't have to talk about it." Mark snapped back immediately. "I'm just glad she's safe." "Mark, you never told me what happened between you guys. It seems pretty serious." Yase Mark stopped himself. It dawned on him, he hadn't told anyone what happened with him and Vanessa. "No, you're right, Jay. I need to talk about this." Yase didn't say anything, just waited patiently for him to talk, and as Mark got his words together, he still stayed silent. "Me and Vanessa broke up like a month ago." We were Mark painfully sighed, quivering as the memories came back. "It was the first time I had a sleep paralysis episode in a long time. It was really bad, like really bad. I freaked out. When I woke up I thought I was having a schizophrenic episode. I couldn't discern what was reality and what wasn't. I went into a psychosis, I thought." Mark began to choke on his words, tears streaming down his face as the memories prodded and jabbed at his brain. "I thought she was going, and I heard her. When I came to, we were in opposite corners of the room, cuts and bruises." Mark choked on his words, they were too hard to swallow. "I'm an awful person, Yase." As Mark began to bawl his eyes out, he folded his hands over his face to hide his shame, to hide the monster he thought he was. "Damn, Mark. That's I don't even." Yase looked over at Mark and saw his friend in pain. Yase pulled the truck over and placed his hand gently on Mark's shoulder. "Listen, what you did was fucked up. I'm not going to straight up lie to you about that. But it also wasn't your fault. You're not an abuser, Mark. You're a damaged person. I'm sorry, for you, and Vanessa. Shit happens, man. But you're a good person. You know that, don't you?" Mark didn't know what he thought of himself now that the question has been posed. Is he a good person? The greater question would be, can good people do bad things, and still be good people? Mark? Yase felt the silence for too long. It became a burden. Yeah. You're right. Mark had no idea what to say. It felt like a worm was eating his stomach and getting ready to burst through his chest. Both of the men hopped out of the truck after Yase parked. They didn't really exchange words. There was simply an understanding in the air. Tonight went horribly. Mark threw back on his black jacket that had a patch sewn onto it that said security. The patch had a lazy sewing job, so it hung off the jacket slightly. Yase did the same, and as they sat down he turned over to Mark. Look, it's been a hot night. I'll go run rounds on the west wing of the property, catch some Z's, and you can run your rounds on the east when I get back. Don't talk back. Let's just get tonight's shift done, together. Yase walked off and began his rounds. Mark sat there for a moment, silence enveloping him. He was scared to sleep, to even drift off. But like Yase said, Tonight had been a long night, and sleeping had become inevitable. Mark was in the middle of the ocean. He expected it to be storming, for a tidal wave to come and sweep him away. But it was beautiful. The sun beamed a warmth onto Mark's skin. The ocean breeze smelled sweet, but of course salty. He couldn't help but relax. A voice came out of nowhere, the same voice that's always there. "Mark, do you remember our day at the beach? You and your cousin had so much fun. I'd never seen you so happy. The next day your father died. I never saw that happy boy again." These words pierced through his heart. He never thought about that day, or the day. How could he? He was so young. It was so painful. I needed you after that, and you abandoned me." "Yeah, well, I needed you too, kid. You're the one who dash. You could have lived. You could have gotten better and fought for me." He didn't notice it, but tears streamed down his face. "I was broken, Mark. I never, ever meant to hurt you. You know that, right?" The faceless woman Mark so desperately wished he could recognize gently hugged him. He could feel her presence, but not her touch. "Yeah, me too." Yase walked around the west wing of the pharmaceutical building. Jay knew there wouldn't be anyone breaking in, but he also knew he had to do his job. He peeked through the windows on doors, shined his flashlight through the hollow hallways. "I wonder if Mark is sleeping. I wonder if that's a good thing." Yase felt concern for his friend. He thought back to when they met. Zhao was about 16 years old, Mark was maybe 14. It was the infamous neighborhood of Compton, California. Yase was walking home when he saw a scrawny white kid being beat on by two older boys. Yase barreled towards the boy immediately. Hey! Get the fuck off him!" Young Yase pleaded out. He was trying to sound tough, but it didn't work. "Oh yeah? Or what? You think you can do something about it?" The older kids dropped the bloodied, smaller child. "Run!" he shouted as he started his own altercation with the bullies. Yase felt every punch slam into his face, his ribs, his stomach. He was on the verge of bawling and puking when the smaller kid tackled one of the older boys. They all fought until sundown, when the older kids finally gave up and went home. The two younger children, battered and bruised, exchanged a look of mutual pain and understanding of that pain. Tears fell down their faces onto the grass stained red from their blood. With that they laughed and walked each other home. Yase looked back on that moment fondly. It was a sad moment but a great memory. The day he met Mark, that scrawny white kid couldn't fight for shit, but neither could Yase. When he returned to the office, Mark was already awake. He was quiet. The rest of the night went on without any other events. Mark did his rounds. They watched over the security cameras, and both caught a little more shut-eye. Looking back now, they wish they knew that would be one of their few last chances to sleep. Outro. As the night unfolds, Mark and Yase are left grappling with more questions than answers. What was the man really doing in that van? And why did everything about him feel so wrong? The mystery deepens, leaving Mark to wonder if they've just scratched the surface of something far more sinister. With danger lurking in the shadows and paranoia creeping in, they are about to discover that some encounters don't end when the night does. The tension is rising, and the truth may be far darker than they ever anticipated. Stay tuned for what comes next, because in this game of cat and mouse, no one is safe.